want to talk about the future of spiritual community because I believe it's very bright. But before I do that, a brief rant. A few weeks ago, the Forward ran an article saying synagogues across the United States closed. And it covered the very newsworthy event that because of the great Jewish appreciation for the sanctity of life, every single synagogue building in the United States had closed its doors, and there was no in-person minyan anywhere in the country for the first time in American history. But what frustrated me about the article is it focused on the closed buildings and said all synagogues are closed. But we know that synagogues are as open as they've ever been. An institution that was accused of being legacy and hidebound and resistant to change has embraced this digital moment and found new ways to be in touch with its constituents. And it's true of synagogues and churches and other religious organizations that we've realized our real mission is to be in people's lives, to be a beacon of hope and faith and community, and across the country, religious organizations have embraced in new ways that mission. I believe Kol Emeth to be a leader in this regard. We're not just doing the same old and streaming it. We've been doing exciting meditation. We've been doing brief classes on Musar and Talmud. We've been offering virtual museum tours. We've been creating amazing social gatherings. In other words, we've been embracing this moment and finding ways of connecting because we realize our mission is the same mission that God gave to the Mishkan in the desert, to the movable sanctuary. Build me a Mishkan that I may dwell in their midst. The purpose of a synagogue or other religious community is to create a place in which God may dwell in the community. Because when God dwells in the community, we are lifted up. We realize our purpose and mission to bring light and hope and blessing into the world. It creates joy and it reminds us of the need to be in communication and community with one another. We're reading Parashat Bamidbar, the story of the Israelites carrying that Mishkan, that movable sanctuary, through the desert and into a promised land. We know that when it was built, Moses was given a specific responsibility. He was a Beit Kibul L'Ruchaniyot. He was a vessel to hold the Spirit, to hold God's energy. As Isaiah Horowitz teaches, that meant he lived on this very supernal level, where he was so connected with the divine that he understood in a deep way what it meant to live and walk with God. And that it flowed from him. It meant that he was attentive and caring of each member of his community. It meant that he had the pause to notice the burning bush. It meant that he had the moral rigor to respond when an Egyptian taskmaster was beating up an Israelite. It meant he had the clear voice to articulate God's law into the world. And he needed a partner. He needed Bezalel, the artist, to be able to take that purity of vision of what it means to dwell with God and to create a physical structure that could inspire the Israelites towards a similar location. And so they were inspired and uplifted to carry that with them through the desert and into the promised land. It carried them as much as they carried it, to remind them to connect with God and one another, to see that each one of them had a mission and a purpose. There was a certain marching order. Judah, for example, walked in front because they were the largest, strongest tribe, and so they were there to defend the Israelites from other communities that might attack. Issachar walked towards the middle because it was their responsibility to hold and care for some of the temple vessels. In other words, each person knew their responsibility in the place that they marched, and they carried together and found great joy and meaning in that journey. So look, we are also on a journey, and we have burdens that we're carrying. And I believe that our new building in this challenging moment can inspire us. Kol Emeth, the new building, is almost finished. You can drive over there now and see its beauty. And I believe it has a symbolism and a message to us that just like the Mishkan inspired the Israelites, it can inspire us even when we can't be in it. It's going to be a while before we can have in-person gatherings. We are a tradition that honors and loves life, and that means we're going to be among the last to have in-person gatherings. Because we recognize that we can still be in each other's lives in a myriad of ways. That making the effort to be sure every single at-risk congregant is called once or twice a week is something that we embrace and do as a community. We have over 80 volunteers every week calling over 150 people. We recognize that calling our whole community on a regular basis means saying to people at a time of separation and isolation, know that you are noticed and seen and Kol Emeth cares about you. You know, I've had phone calls with people now that have taken on a new context, a new color. It used to be that I would call people, they'd be pretty short, I'd hit an answering machine, people were busy. Now I find we have these deep conversations about what it feels like to be in quarantine, where someone is in this moment, whether alone, with family, what the unexpected blessings are, what some of the challenges are. And we really connect in a deep way that I'm so grateful for. So even though it's sad we won't be in our building yet, I believe that building can inspire us. I believe it can give us the strength to carry our burdens to this time of quarantine into a promised land. You know, when you approach the building from the outside, you're going to see a beautiful brise soleil, a sunshade made out of reclaimed wood. Each piece of wood tells a story. It was found and recovered from construction sites, so it has a beautiful environmental property about it. And each piece of wood, you know, has texture. There's knots and cracks. They're aged wood. And so each piece, I believe, can symbolize each one of us as members of our community. We come with our own stories, our broken places, places also of beauty and color. And when you put all those wood pieces together and they've been artfully done, it creates a beautiful multicolored image. It's marvelous. And similarly, when you look at our whole community, you see something of incredible beauty. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, how beautiful are your tents, O Jacob. And when you walk into the building, you're going to see right away that the courtyard remains at the center of Kol Emeth. Because we are a face-to-face community. We are a place that believes in seeing one another and being in each other's lives. Shared kiddushes and time to be together and celebrate are going to be at the center of who we are and what we do. And it extends into the sanctuary. We'll sit facing one another so that part of our experience of prayer and song is to be together in community. We will invite God to dwell in our midst by friendship and connection in human story. And the ark itself is these two big slabs that bring to mind the story of God holding Moses in the cleft in the rock. They are stories of intimacy, of connection, of a humble connection between people and God. And so we're reminded also of humility. Even in the beauty of our building, it's a humble structure. This virus has reminded us that we are not as powerful as we once imagined. We are still very much at risk in the world, and our lives are tenuous things. And yet, in community and in connection, in places where we hear one another's stories, where we care for each other, those are places where we create meaning. Those are places where we remind ourselves that it is worth carrying the burdens of our life so that we can be together and bring blessing into the world. And lastly, our building, though secure, has been constructed in such a way to be open to the world. There's a lot of greenery inside. It's not closed off to the neighborhood, because we recognize that our responsibilities cannot end at the doors of the synagogue. Rather, it is a place that inspires us to take holy action into the world. That when we see people who are hungry, we give to Second Harvest. When we see people without homes and who are struggling to make their rent, we give to Life Moves or the Mountain View Day Center. When we see that there are people in need, we make blankets and food packages, and we make sure they get delivered, even in a time of quarantine, to people who need them. And Kol Emeth, we are doing all of those things because our community has never been more vibrant than it is at this moment. I believe that this is a time where people will remember how important synagogues and spiritual communities are in our lives. That they are a place that are not about transactional relationships. You know, we don't need to rush to open because we're not like a restaurant that makes money only when people buy a meal. We don't have to rush to open like a gym where people only pay their monthly dues when they can use the equipment. People are continuing to support and show their connection to Kol Emeth because they know that we are offering something much more essential, which is Jewish and human community. Listen, we have burdens in front of us. We don't know how long this will last. And so just like the Israelites in the desert wrestled with uncertainty and complained, Moses, why weren't there enough graves in Egypt that you brought us here? Moses, where's the water and the food? We can be filled with some uncertainty, and we don't know what's going to be next. But I believe our community And by that I mean our friendships, our human interactions, our phone calls, our times of prayer together, our saying Kaddish as a community. These are places where we remind ourselves that there is hope and we are carrying a Mishkan, a community, into a new promised land. I wish all of us strength and hope and joy at what could be a dark time. I invite you to stay connected to one another. Call each other. Be in touch with people in the community. Notice friends and people in your immediate area. We've gotten to know some of our next door neighbors more closely than ever before. We've been doing some grocery shopping for one of them. And they even brought us a sort of funny microwave cover just to kind of pay back or whatever. But we've now connected with our communities in new and wonderful ways. I urge you to make those human connections, because one thing that's in front of us is potentially a mental health catastrophe that our separation and our isolation can bring on. And the way we push it back is by people knowing that they are loved and seen and cared for. If you get a call from somebody out of the blue just checking in, it is inspiring and uplifting. And when you yourself make that call, it is similarly filled with purpose. You know where you stand in the marching order. You are doing exactly what God needs you to do in that moment and bringing hope